Thank you so much for joining us, Ashutosh, and a very good morning to everyone here. This is Gautam from Microsoft. I drive the VC and PE ecosystem partnerships and also a CA by background. So definitely would be enjoying this session listening to Ashutosh as we, go through the most underrated area of focus for every startup. An area that as startups you all tend to put on the back burner, and that's exactly why we have it today, because it's extremely important while a lot of us don't give it the importance that we should. So thank you so much for joining us, Ashutosh. Ashutosh is a CA by education and has been a practicing chartered accountant. He also has been running a consulting firm. So thank you so much, Ashutosh, for joining us. And like I said in the introduction, bookkeeping, finance basics, compliances are usually things that founders stay away from. They always believe they know it, or they feel they're too scared to touch it. It could be either way. There's never a midway where they believe that we should give it the respect that it needs. Uh, and I've known one too many founders who've been on either side of the spectrum. So that's where I thought it will be very useful for us to have this deep dive, more of a basic session where we drill in the importance as well as some of the basics for a lot of founders here for as they start scaling their venture in the technology space. So on that note, it will be great, Ashutosh, if you start with a quick introduction. But for the others here, welcome once again for our Thursday sessions as a part of the Highway to 100 Unicorns. We've been doing this for a very long time, and a lot of you have been, a very good part of all these Thursday sessions. While we've been doing and consciously trying to go deep into every Thursday session across the different horizontals and verticals that every startup typically needs to know and have open discussions about. Today we have Ashutosh joining us on the basics of finance, books, bookkeeping, and compliance. So, Ashutosh, thank you so much, and over to you. You can check if your screen sharing works, and you may start with a quick introduction from your end.
Thank you, Gautam, for the awesome introduction, and thanks a lot for inviting me to put a light on the importance of the most underrated factor in a startup or a business, that's bookkeeping and compliance. Although this should be the most important thing that somebody should take care of. So thanks a lot for inviting me here. I am a chartered accountant, as he already briefed you by profession. I have few consulting firms that are helping the businesses to grow and to help them in order to be compliant with the government laws and to have the financial information, crucial financial information handy for the decision making. So just about a brief for myself, I cleared my chartered accountancy in 2013 and started my own practice right away. Then in 2016, I found my calling into the international taxations and helping the people out and going global as soon as possible. So I founded the Autus Consultants in 2016, and in 2020, we went global while having a presence in the United States of America. So this is a brief about me. So what is bookkeeping? Most of people think that recording of transactions is all about bookkeeping. Like whatever they are doing through the bank account, they should just keep a track of that transactions and the bookkeeping is done. But no, it's not. It's just a start of the bookkeeping. It's a small process. It's a small thing into the process of bookkeeping, recording of transactions. It's a major goal. It's like recording of transaction while classifying them, summarizing them, preparing the details for the proper reporting, and then after interpretation of that. So what does the classification, summarizing, reporting, and interpretation mean, and why it is so important? Just recording of the transaction does not mere satisfy the goal of bookkeeping. We should properly classify the transactions, like what are the incomes, what are the expenses, what are the revenue, what are the IPs we are going to build, what are the taxations we have to pay, what are the tax-free items, what are the taxable items and all. Once we classify them into the details, into the separate details, we have to summarize all those things. That gives a clear bird eye view on the business and the financial health of the business, that helps in reporting prepare the reports and then after interpretation them to the management so that they can take the crucial financial decision. Maybe they can decide the strategies of the business they are going to do in the future. So this is the most important thing. This is the process of a bookkeeping what somebody should follow. Why to do bookkeeping? What are the benefits? This is, as you just said, Gautam, this is the most underrated sector of a business where people gives the least consideration upon or the attention upon. There are a lot of benefits a business can have while doing the bookkeeping. They do track the financial status of the business. What does we mean by the tracking financial status of the business is like checking the health of the business, financial health of the business, how the cash flows are going, where the funds are going, how the cash we are generating, where we are investing our money, where we are expending our money. If we do not know it, we cannot identify our KPIs. We cannot identify how we can increase the profitability, how we can put some more effort in doing business in a certain sector. So tracking the financial status and tracking the financial state of business is directly linked with the bookkeeping and accounting. Only with the help of bookkeeping, we can conclude how the cash flows are coming in into the business. So cash flow is a major part of the business. If the cash is not regularly flowing into the business, we cannot run the business. We will be in stress. The business will be in stress. So the tracking cash flow and tracking the future cash flow is a major part why we should do the bookkeeping. Next one is like tracking the profits and the losses. Profits is the major thing that drives the business. If we do not have proper profits into the business, or maybe if we do not have proper accountability of the profit into the business, we will not be able to survive for a long. For the startup, survival is the key area. If a startup cannot survive for a certain period of time, the startup may die. So the tracking profits and the losses on a regular basis, and then after doing some strategical changes and putting some more efforts into the increasing the profits, that is directly linked with the bookkeeping or the accounting. So if some startup want to become profitable, or if they want to survive for a longer term, they should have a proper and regular track about the profitability of the business. Next key area what we can consider is keeping a track on the business valuation. So valuation of the startup is the most important part in the startup journey. We cannot track the valuation of a startup unless we have a proper track record how we are generating the cash. What is the profitability we are having? How much is the revenue is coming in from the prototype or the product the startup has made? This all directly linked to the business valuation. Although the past year figures, historical figures, as well as the future anticipation of the revenue, future anticipation of the profits, future anticipation of the expansion strategy is completely derived by doing the bookkeeping. That is why bookkeeping directly hits the business valuations. Next one is to keep proper records for receivables and payables. So each and every business have the vendor through which they buy something, or they have the customers the customers pays to the business. So in order to keep the proper records of the receivables as well as the payables, a business should keep a proper track record that is being prepared in the bookkeeping by the accounts payable and receivable summary, debtors and the creditors. So that is being maintained by the bookkeeper, and the bookkeeping plays a major vital role in deciding how much they are going to receive, how much they have to pay. That helps in budgeting as well. This helps in deciding the profitability. This helps in anticipating the cash flows. This helps in arranging the cash so that they can pay to their creditors. The next we can list is keeping the track of any asset developed within the organization. So keeping a track of asset developed by, there is IP that is being developed by the various startups. intellectual property, they develop some processes, they develop some products, might be they develop some tools that can help a lot of businesses, or that can help mass to ease their life on daily basis. So if we do not do the bookkeeping, we do not know how much time and money we have invested in developing that asset. Why is it so important? Because first, we can have a track how much we have invested in terms of money or in terms of man hours to develop a particular intellectual property. And also, if we can properly assess that thing, that helps in getting the business valued or the tool valued properly, as well as that helps in getting the depreciation upon that. So depreciation is a very important thing to calculate, because it helps in reducing taxes that in turn increase the cash flow into the business. So we cannot track the cost of an asset developed without bookkeeping. We cannot determine the depreciation without bookkeeping. And there are a lot of economies or the countries that that gives you more than 100%, maybe 150 or 200% of the cost that we incurred in developing an asset. In general, we call it IP, as a depreciation. So this is very important and major thing to keep a complete track record how much a company has invested into developing a IP for that organization. So the next vital importance of the bookkeeping is the claiming various business expenses and getting the tax reduction on the same. If we are just keeping an Excel, and if we are not having the proper track record, we may not be able to determine the business expenses, various business expenses that occurs not on the cash basis, but on the accrual basis. So if we do not have a proper bookkeeping in place, we may lose recordings of business expenses that may result in higher tax liabilities. So this is important. We need to have a complete thing in place for the bookkeeping so that we can claim proper expenses and get the tax reduction. Next thing is to do the tax compliance. Yeah, I think everybody should know that they need to have a bookkeeping in place just to do the tax compliance. This is one of the major rules. If we do not do the tax compliances in time and in a proper way, the government will come after us. They will send us a lot of notices. There will not be peace of mind to do the business. We have to incur penalties, and we may have to generate or bring in some extra cash just to pay the government penalties, which does not gives any productive or operational profits into the business. So next thing is record keeping as required by the various tax laws. So government requires the businesses or the startups or the business owners to keep certain records so that they can have a proper regulation over the business. They do have a proper idea about the information of the business and all. So in order to keep that, bookkeeping is the most important thing to keep the financial records as it is required by the law. Peer comparisons. This is called industry comparison as well. For say, if a startup is operating in an industry wherein there are other players as well, a startup needs to regularly watch their progress, regularly watch their expenses, their operating profits, their revenues, how much clients they are serving. They cannot compare themselves with the peers in the industry until unless they have some financial record keeping in place. Through the bookkeeping, they can compare their revenue with the other startups. They compare their revenue per client or per downloads or some other way as per the industry they operates into. They can also calculate the net profitability along with the other startups. They can also take care or calculate the percentage of revenue they are spending for the expansion or the marketing. They can also understand how they can increase the revenue or the profitability by comparing the peers. If they do not know what are their own records, they cannot compare themselves with the peers or other people in the industry. Establish and analyzing benchmarks. Each and every startup has to establish a benchmark, maybe in terms of revenue or in terms of turning profitable or in terms of valuation or in terms of per capita, per person revenue they are receiving or something like that. If we do not have a proper record keeping in place, if we do not establish the revenue we're going to receive, or as we do not establish how much we are spending in order to get one sales lead or one lead to convert into the sales, we cannot run in a long term, and we cannot analyze our benchmarks what we have set before. So bookkeeping helps us in establishing the benchmarks, and then after a certain period, maybe quarterly, half-yearly, annually, we can compare ourselves with the benchmark we have set. Also, we will be able to compare ourselves with the benchmarks of the industry. So having bookkeeping is like having a record handy. It's kind of dashboard we are having for certain financial figures handy, through which we can compare ourselves with the other people. We can compare ourselves with the benchmarks we have already set. This helps in regulating and watching the growth we are having. This helps in re-strategizing ourselves, like how we can grow better than before. This also helps in reducing the unnecessary expenses. This also helps in increasing the profitability or increasing the cash flow. This all comes handy if we have a proper records and proper reports in hand. Next we can say is keeping an eye over the financial progress. It's a real time, if it's a real time thing, we have to keep an eye on the financial progress as well as the progress of the processes of other departments of the business. So the bookkeeping plays a vital role into that, by giving the real time figures, how we are going in future, how we are growing, what are the progress we have done since the last review. This call comes handy if we have a bookkeeping complete process in place. This gives a lot of information, relevant information, through which we can design our future strategy. We can analyze ourselves, what we have done in the past, and how we can improve that thing in order to attain our goal. We can also able to set our goal on the basis of our future or on the basis of our historical progress. So this is very important. So doing business analysis, there are a lot of analysis that can be done using the bookkeeping thing, like how much revenue we are generating versus how much revenue our competitors are generating, how much rupees or how much money we are spending in order to get one lead versus how much money others are spending in order to get lead, how much we are spending in order to convert that lead into the sales or other are doing that, what are our costing basis, how much costing we are incurring in serving a client, how much man hours we are putting in order to establish a process or in order to attain a goal, in order to do one service. So this all business analysis can be done only if we have complete bookkeeping in place. Bookkeeping gives us an idea how much we have invested to convert a lead into the sales. Bookkeeping gives us an idea how much cost we are incurring for the sales or maybe the marketing thing. It also segregates and gives us an idea how much administrative cost we are bearing, how much operating cost we are bearing, how much is the operating profit we are going to have. So this all business analysis can be done if we have the bookkeeping in place and all the reports handy with us. The management can have a awesome idea on their business, and and they can go deep down into the processes just by looking a pager report that is being prepared by the bookkeeper. The business can also do the sensitivity analysis. So sensitivity analysis is something that affects the process of the business or that affects certain expense or the revenue of the business. So we can determine what factors are impacting the processes of the business and how much they are impacting the processes of the business by having reports handy, bookkeeping reports handy. We can determine, like, after a certain event, how much the revenue we are going to have, how much impact we are going to have in our costings, how much impact we are going to have in our business. That can only be tracked by the basis of the reports generated by doing the bookkeeping. Next is keeping a track and curve on business expenses. Like, if a startup or a business does not have a proper bookkeeping in place and they does not have a proper reports, profit and loss, income and expenditure reports, or monthly comparison of the expenses versus revenue, or yearly comparisons versus the expenses versus the revenue, or the financial ratios, like the net profit ratios, gross profit ratios, current ratios, these all are helping into the tracking the health of the business. If we do not have all these things handy, we cannot track and curb the business expenses. If we do not have the reports and other things in handy, we cannot be like how much we are spending on something, how we can curb on those business expenses, how we can reduce the costing. These all can be done by using the reports generated by the doing the bookkeeping. Next is strategy building. There are a lot of strategies like the sales strategy, like the revenue increasing strategy a business should have. So if we need to build a strategy for the financial basis or on the revenue basis, revenue is like the lifeline of the business. If we do not have a proper strategy in order to increase the revenue and in order to reduce the costing, then we may lose the business, we may lose the profits, and the business may die. So in order to prepare the strategy, financial strategy of the business, we need to have a lot of information in place. And that information can be gathered by doing the process that is called bookkeeping. We can prepare n number of reports by using the proper tools for the bookkeeping. And that reports helps us business a lot in order to become profitable, in order to become a success. Increase in cash flow. So the increase in cash flow can happen by using the bookkeeping reports. Like if we properly segregate and classify the details, if we properly record each and every transaction, we can have a lot of things in handy. Like I told you, the depreciation, that is a product of the bookkeeping. If we have the proper depreciation calculated, it is the deductible expenditures in almost all the country across the globe that helps reducing the taxes. And reducing the taxes obviously increase the cash flow into the business. Like there are a lot of other accrual expenses. For example, maybe the pre-incorporation expenses. If we properly record that, the business does not do the pre-incorporation expenses from their bank account. It is the founder or the owner that does it. But if we do not have a proper bookkeeping in place, we may not be able to calculate the pre-incorporation expenses, and that in turn can reduce the tax liability for the business, and reducing the tax liability direct impacts increase in cash flow for the business. And this is cash flow is very important for some businesses. So going next, budget preparation and comparative analysis. Budget preparation is a product of the historical data merged with the future perception and the future planning of the management. We cannot prepare budget if we do not have proper historical data in place, as well if we do not have the proper details like proper classification of the expenses we are going to have, proper classification of the revenue streams we are having. If we do not have all these things handy, we cannot budget our expenses, we cannot budget our inflows as well. So this is a very imperative part of a business, very important for a business, so that they can budget the things they are having. If you do not have a proper budget in place, it will be like spend as many as you have in your pocket. Budgeting is very crucial thing into the business, whether it's corporate or startup or a small industry or a small business. Budgeting is super important. That's why we need to have budget in place, and in order to have budget in place, we need to have proper bookkeeping. And the comparative analysis, we can compare our business results with the previous year, previous year results. Maybe we can prepare the quarterly comparative reports. We can prepare the year-on-year comparative reports that helps in tracking how much growth we had, how much profitability we increased or decreased, how much cash revenue we are increasing or decreasing, how much funds we are retaining into the business. That gives a clear comparative idea within our business with the previous years, that helps in realigning the future strategy, that helps in building the future strategy so that we can attain the goal. Helping and pitching investor. This is the most important thing for a startup, to pitch to the investor. If we do not have proper reports, for example, the revenue reports, maybe the profit and loss reports, income and expenditure reports, and a lot of other reports handy, the historical revenues, the future revenues we are going to have, then we cannot pitch the investor properly, as investor is always interested in how you have already did the business and how you're going to do the business. What are the perception of yours for your business? how much revenue or how much income you're going to receive into the business. So this is the something that investor is super interested in about. If we do not have these things handy, we cannot pitch an investor properly, and the startup may lose the crucial funding. So the next one is calculating various financial ratios. As we just discussed, financial ratios gives a fair idea about the health of the business, financial health of the business. There are various financial ratios that into that the banks are interested, the investors are interested, so that they can invest into the business, like current ratios, liquidity ratios, debt service ratios, maybe working capital ratios, and all these things are very important for a business. We cannot calculate all these ratios. We cannot have these things handy if we do not have a proper bookkeeping in place. These ratios gives a bird eye view about the each and every detail of the business. Only by looking at these ratios, a lot of problems, financial problems, can be solved at. Even we can increase the cash flow into the business. We can increase the profitability into the business. So next one is keeping a close eye on operating cost and administrative cost. So operating cost is something that is direct cost in order to run the business. This is the direct expense that is being done in order to generate some revenue. So operating cost should be as minimum as it can be in terms of revenue, so that we can increase the operating profits. Like most of the startups may be or are into the operating profits, but they come into the losses because of their administrative overheads or administrative costs, like the operating like the sales and promotion costing, administrative costing and all. In order to keep curve on these costing, in order to keep these minimum, in order to have a better idea how we are incurring the administrative cost and the operating cost in terms of generating 1 rupee of the revenue, this gives us a clear idea how much we should reduce it, how we can reduce it, so that we can turn profitable, we can increase the cash flows, we can increase the profits. Also, we can increase the valuations of the business. Next one is identifying KPI and the critical drivers. So KPI is the key performance indicators. If we have a proper report in place, we can determine what are the KPIs. Some businesses have the direct material cost as the KPI. Some businesses has like the invested customer hours as a KPI. Some businesses have different KPIs. It depends upon the industry they are operating into. So identifying KPI is a crucial role, so that we can have the profitability in place, and we can have like we can have the exact idea of the revenue. So KPI determining can be possible by using the bookkeeping, and these are the critical drivers that drives the business, that drives the revenue, that drives the profits, that drives the valuation of the business. Like a lot of businesses are there that have the KPI as much clients as they can serve. If they have the proper records of the persons they are serving, or if they have the proper records like how many active customers they are having on monthly basis or on daily basis, that drives their business, that drives their valuation. We can have proper records, we can have proper reports in place if we have the bookkeeping or other proper record keeping processes in place. Next one is it's your financial guide. Bookkeeping gives us a clear idea where we have came from and where we are heading to. If we have proper bookkeeping in place, we can say like we can attain some certain goals in a certain period of time, or we have came that much long way from the zero thing we have started from. So it's a financial guide, this kind of financial Sherpa to our business, which guides our business towards a certain benchmark, towards a certain goal. If we do not have proper record keeping, proper bookkeeping in place, we may not have any idea where we are heading to or where we are coming from. This helps in identifying the growth. This helps in documenting our journey from the start. So this is something very urgent, very important we need to have into place. These are just a few benefits that I can list about the bookkeeping. But bookkeeping is a very, very vast and very important process that each and every person should have handy and should have into the business. that gives a clear idea how the business is operating, and it can create major difference between a success and a failure. So these are the some benefits of bookkeeping. Now moving on towards the thing, how can we do the bookkeeping, or how can the bookkeeping be done? So yes, there are certain processes, there are certain standards on the basis of which somebody should do the bookkeeping. The different countries have different sets of standards, so that bookkeeping can be uniformed. They can compare the financial reports with the other organization, as those are standardized in certain terms. The reports can be compared with the global standards, or with the global industry leaders, or with the global peers, because they have some certain standard operating procedures. Like there are various standards on accounting depending upon the country. Like there are AS is like accounting standards. India generally follow the accounting standards. US GAAP, UK GAAP. There is Indian AS, Ind AS. Now India is moving from AS to Ind AS. There are IFRS, International Financial Reporting Standards. A lot of countries have adhered to the IFRS reporting standards, so that they have standardized financial reports across the globe that can be easily compared. Like by looking at all these accounting standards, you might also understand the importance of the bookkeeping the government is putting into, or the big corporates and the big startups are putting into, because the bookkeeping plays a vital and important role in deciding the business between a failure and the success. So deciding internally into a business, like how should they strategize the business, how can they get successful in their business. So this is very important. Generally, there are two basic fundamentals on which accounting should be done. In addition to all these accounting standards, the world understands accounting as a cash basis accounting or the accrual basis accounting. There is a small basic difference between the cash and accrual basis. As you can understand by the name, cash basis accounting is like accounting the income and expenses as and when they are received and paid into the cash or the bank. It's not about accrual, it's about receiving or paying. If we have received something, or if we have paid something, then we should account for that. Whatever we have received, we should account for that as an income or the revenue, or whatever we have paid, that should be as a purchase or as an expenses. But the limitation with the cash basis is it is generally not allowed to be used until the eternity. There is certain limit. For example, India has a certain limit of 40 lakh rupees of the turnover. US has a bit higher limit of $25 million as the turnover. But the big companies are not allowed to use this kind of accounting for their accounting thing. Now coming to the accrual basis accounting is like recording the income or the revenue and expenses or the payments as and when it is getting due or the invoices is made. If we have raised an invoice to the customer, irrespective of the fact whether the customer has paid that or not, we have to record that invoice as a revenue. And if we have received some invoice from the vendor, and if that invoice relates to that particular accounting period, then irrespective of the fact whether we have made the payment for that invoice or not, we should record that invoice as an expense. This is the most relevant and commonly followed way of accounting across the globe. This gives the best results that pertains to that particular year. If a business is doing accounting on the accrual basis, they can have an exact idea of the profits they got for a certain accounting year. As they are not depending only upon the bank accounts, they are recording the whole picture of accounting, whether they are paying something or not, or whether they are receiving something or not. But if that certain income or expense or revenue pertains to that particular accounting period, then it is already recorded. So it gives the best idea about the profitability and the revenue of the business. So generally, each all the big businesses use the accrual basis of accounting, and generally each and every business is recommended to use the accrual basis of accounting. Now moving on to the compliance. So getting a business compliant is the most important thing in order to endure the business. if we do not comply properly with the government can anytime come after you. They can thrash you with a lot of notices. They can issue a lot of penalties on you, and the business cash flow may completely be gone just to pay those penalties. There will not be any revenue or the cash flow remain into the business through which the business can run itself. So if we are not properly compliant, the business can shutter in no time. But if the business is properly complied, then the business can endure in long term. The business can be successful in long term, and the business can expand itself in the long term. Now the question is arise, what is compliance? In general, adhering to the laws made by the government is the compliance. Compliance are like set of duties. As we are talking the compliance about the business and only, then we are talking about the business and the owner terms. The compliance are the set of duties which each and every business and the owner needs to perform. Why they need to perform? Because government need to have a relevant data and government need to perform its regulatory options. So most of the business owners and most of the entrepreneurs are afraid of the compliances as they do not understand as the exact law, and there may be a lot of glitches into the law and all. So that can hinder their businesses. But by compliance, government actually regulates the business area. They gives the direction to the economy. They gives the business owners and the entrepreneurs a proper playground wherein they can play. By compliance, government have a relevant data to develop the resources business should need. They have the relevant data to develop equal opportunities for revenue generation and employment. By compliance, government have an exact data through which they can decide the future of that industry. They can decide the future of the economy. They can, in long run, they can give all the required things to that particular industry that helps that industry in growth. So that is why the compliance is required. Why to do the compliance? So first of all, we do not have any option because the government wants us to comply with the laws. So that's the major reason to comply with the government. In addition to that, we need to comply as we have to pay the taxes, as we owe some taxes to the government. If we do not have the proper compliance in place, we are not able to calculate the exact amount of taxes. We may end up paying more taxes or we may end up paying less taxes. Both are not good for the business. If we are paying more, then we are losing money. And if we are paying lesser taxes, then government can come after us. They can put the notices on our business. They can issue penalties on our business, and then after they can take a lot of money from the business. So this will also impact the peace of mind of a business owner, and the business owner may not be able to focus on the core area of the business. They will just be keep planning how they can avoid the penalties and all. So the second important thing is paying the taxes. Third one is reporting to the government with the required data. As I just told you, government needs the data as well as the revenue. So just paying taxes is not the meaning of compliance. Compliance is directly linked with the reports generation and the data sending to the government. So government requires certain data so that they can build their policies. Government requires certain data so that they can give the businesses the required proper resources. They can shape the policies. They can do the infrastructure development. They can curve the flow of money between the businesses and all these. In order to perform all these options by the government, they require a lot of compliance to be done. So reporting to the government is one major thing why we need to do the compliance. Next one is trust building. So maybe a lot of you might be thinking how doing compliance can build the trust. So the thing is, there are a lot of people who are not comfortable in doing business with those organizations who are not properly compliant. For example, if a business is doing the tax withholding is also a compliance type of compliance. If a business is required to do the tax withholding, and after deducting the taxes, if the business is not depositing the tax to the government on behalf of their customer, then the customer lose trust into the business as the customer's portion of revenue has been already deducted by an organization, And if that organization is not properly depositing that revenue with the government, then the customer is losing money. That customer won't be comfortable in doing business with those organizations. This happens with the sales tax as well. This happens with the employees as well. If the employees compliances are not properly done, for example, if the provident funds are not properly deducted and deposited, if the tax withholdings are not properly done and well in time, if their investments, like various investments, maybe in India you can say PF, maybe in US you can say 401k, and different countries have their different investment requirements for the social security of their employees. If the business is not properly doing that compliance in place, employees won't be working for that business. Employees will not be comfortable in working there. Employees are the crucial resource for a business in order to run. So trust building is a major thing that can be done by doing the proper compliances. Next one is helps in focusing on core area of business and expand the business. As I just told you, if you have a peace of mind, you can focus on the things you love. You love your business. You love the core area of business that generates the revenue. If you have peace of mind, you can focus on that. You can build new strategies. You can build new products. You can build new processes, and by selling those, you can have revenue in place. You can have profits in place. But if compliances are not properly done and are not done well within time, then you may always fear the government. You may be having a lot of notices that shifts your focus from your core area of business, from the revenue generating area of your business, to those notices and the compliances. That takes a lot of money from the businesses as a penalty. So in order to expand the business, in order to focus on the core area of the business, one should have a peace of mind, and that can attain if you do the proper compliance. There may be a lot of businesses in the world. If you search and if you have the case studies handy, there are a lot of businesses in the world which are completely trashed just because they were not properly compliant. Although they were having good revenues, although they were having good percentage of profits, they were earning profits, but as they lose on the compliance area, and the businesses are dead right now. So in order to be successful, in order to endure into the business, one should do the proper compliance so that they are having a peace of mind. They can focus on the core area of their businesses. They can expand their businesses, and the government, they can be sure from the government side, like, yes, this is not one thing that is going to kill our business. To get the government sponsored benefits. So the government sponsor a lot of benefits. Like in India, government gives the benefits for startups that are registered to TPI, and the incentives from the income tax perspective. They also give incentives from the GST perspective. If the business is properly compliant, they have proper bookkeeping reports in place, they have proper compliances in place, they can have loans on a subsidized interest rate from the government. They can have various other kind of benefits. For example, recently a lot of governments during the COVID has issued a lot of incentive programs. They give the incentives to the people, like they give incentive to the for the payroll payments to the business, but only if they have already complied with the government previously and they have proper bookkeeping records in place. If a business show both these things to the government, they can have the refunds of the uh, of the salaries of their businesses from the government during the COVID, from the countries wherein the government sponsored these benefits. For example, the United States. Also, United States gave the reduced or the nil rated loans to the businesses during the COVID, and also those loans were waived off. The business are not required to repay those loans. This also became possible only to those businesses who had their proper compliances in place, who had their proper bookkeeping reports in place, which shows how much working capital they are requiring, how much revenue actually they had. So this is very important thing in order to be properly done into the business, that helps you getting much more cash flow on a cheaper rate of interest, or maybe free of cost, that you may not require to repay at all. So these are the government sponsored benefits that can only be applied and get if the business is properly complied with the government, and and the business have proper bookkeeping reports in place. Next one is keeping the business legally safe and to endure into the business. As we just discussed, if we are properly complied with the government, we can consider it that we are safe legally from the government. Government also gives us a shelter, gives shelter to those business who are properly complied with the government from the legal lawsuits. If a business is having legal lawsuit, then government may give certain benefits to those businesses if they are properly complied and if their statement of information and if their KYCs and all other details are properly filed with the government. And if this is properly done, then business can surely endure for a longer period of time, subject to their revenue and the profitability. Helps in due diligence. Due diligence is a major part of startup journey once they are going for the valuations and the fundings. So due diligence can be done only if the compliances are properly done and done in manner. So in order to be sure that if we are going into the valuation or the funding rounds, if we are going to get ourselves valued, if we are pitching an investor, we should have proper compliance in place, because no investor wants to invest in a business that have legal hurdles, that have issues with the government, that have issues with the compliance. So this thing cannot come handy on overnight basis until unless we do it from the very first day of the incorporation of our business. So this helps in due diligence. Compliance helps in due diligence, and in order to get the proper valuation of the business, in order to get the proper funding whenever the business is required, whether it's funding from investor side or whether it's funding from the bank side. But the due diligence is important either way. Keeping actual valuation of the business. A business may have $1 billion value, but if the compliances are not properly done, nobody is going to give them that valuation of the business. So keeping the actual valuation of the business is a byproduct of proper compliance in a place. Primary is something like primary is doing the compliance. Doing business, having the net profits, having operating profits, having a lot of active users on a monthly basis will not help until unless you have proper compliance in place and proper compliances done well within time. These are the things why we should do the compliance. This is just an idea why we should do the compliance. There can be a lot of other benefits of doing the compliance, depending upon the industry, depending upon the country they are operating, depending upon the way they are going to take the business in the future. So coming on to the next thing, what are the basic compliances? A business may need to do a lot of compliances depending upon the industry they are operating, depending upon the country they are registered into, depending upon the country with which they are doing the business, depending upon their branches, offices, and a lot of other things. I'm listing out just a few points. What are the basic compliances that is applicable, generally applicable to almost all the business. So the major thing starts from proper registering the entity. The company should be properly registered. The first step of doing business is to register an entity or a company. If we properly register the entity that best suits the minimum taxability, and getting the open-ended structure, or maybe that helps getting the better investment into it, that works for the longer term. We cannot change the entity on daily basis. So this thing starts from the very first day that we should properly register the entity. We should properly have a complete research in place, like which type of entity needs to be registered, how that entity needs to be registered. If we need to issue a sweat equity, how we should give the authority of that in the incorporating documents. If we are going to issue ESOPs to our employees, how that can be done, who will be the owners, who will be the co-founders, who will be the directors of the entity, who will be going to take care of the entity, what kind of business the entity can do, what will be the object clause of the entity, that each and everything has to be planned in advance, because these all information goes along with the entity registration to the government. We cannot change this on daily basis. So registering a proper entity in a proper manner with the required information with the government is the first compliance that we need to do at the time we are going to start the business. Second thing, once we have registered the entity, we need to get the required credentials in place for the entity. By required credentials, it can be tax ID that we term as PAN in India, and it can be termed as different names within different countries. We should have the income tax ID of that company in place by filing the required information. This is also a compliance. Then after, if the sales tax is applicable under the business, we have to take the sales tax numbers. We have to take sales tax registrations wherever it is required. It can be required on the state basis. It can be required on the city basis. It can be required on the country to country basis. Next one is if some businesses are into the service rendering business, then in that case, they need to have their service tax registration or the use tax registrations in place. Although all the major countries are shifting towards a mechanism into which they are merging the sales tax and the service tax into one tax, so that a business is not required to pay multiple taxes on the same thing. So, but still there are a few countries that are using sales tax as a different taxes and the service tax as a different taxes. So if it is applicable, that needs to be taken. This is also compliance. Next one is payroll. As soon as the business starts, we need employees or the team to work for us. If we do not have a proper payroll system in place, if we do not have a proper payroll tax deposit system in place, and the payroll tax deposit numbers are in place, the employees may not be interested in working into the business, as well as the business will not be properly safe from the government compliances. So as soon as the business have the employees, that business needs to have the payroll thing running in the business. By the payroll, you can take an example as in provident fund registration in India, ESI registration in India, or maybe if you term it from the US sides, it can be FICA taxes, the CCA taxes, Medicare taxes, payroll taxes, 401k investments, HSA contributions. So these like things. Then after tax withheld is like deducting taxes from the payments we are doing from our to our employees, or the payments we are doing to our vendors. So different countries, different government requires different tax withheld requirements. If we are falling into that, then we should have the tax withheld number in place. Next one is keeping proper records in manner. This is also a kind of compliance, because the government will require at the time of assessment the invoices for which you have made the payment, the vouchers on the basis of which you have made the payment. They will be requiring the bookkeeping records in a longer term, so that they can assess what kind of expenses you have done, how you have earned the money, how you have spent the money, how much money you are left with on which the tax needs to be done. So this is why they require the bookkeeping. Other registrations may be there. For example, if some businesses are operating in the space of petroleum products, they may require to register with the petroleum ministry, and they may need to take the registrations from them. If some businesses are into the tobacco dealings, they may need to have different license from the industry, so from the government, in order to properly deal with those. If some businesses are into the medical thing, then they require different requirements for the drug dealing and all. The next type of compliance is filing direct tax or income tax returns. So this each and every business has to do on annual basis.
Okay,
This can be filed either with the central government, or in some countries, the state government also requires the income tax returns to be filed. Next is the indirect tax returns. By the indirect tax, we mean the sales tax and the service tax and the use tax. So if a business is required to file these, is falling under the category of the sales and service tax returns, a business must file the sales tax returns or the indirect tax returns. There are a certain reporting compliance. As I previously said, the government does not require you to only pay the taxes and you are done with the compliances. There are certain reporting compliances as well, which requires a business to report certain data to the government, so that government regulates a lot of other things and frame the policies. For example, transfer pricings. For example, related parties transaction disclosures, funding reporting, etc. Like if business is receiving funds from the foreign investor, then they have to report it to the government. If the business is dealing the related parties that is in a foreign country, they have to do the transfer pricings. If the business is dealing with the directors of the or that particular business, or maybe the other related parties of that business, then those transactions should also be reported to the government, so that government can have a fair idea of how the business is operating, and also the investors or the bank or the other shareholders of the big businesses have a fair idea how the businesses are benefiting their own owners or their related parties. Paying taxes well in time is also a compliance that needs to be done. Otherwise, the business may have the penalties. So these are the basic compliances that a business needs to do. on a general basis. There can be specific compliance depending upon the type of the business and the industry the business is operating into. So this is the brief about how we should keep the bookkeeping, why the bookkeeping is important, and what are the basic compliances a business needs to do, how that can be done, and why the compliances is important. So I hope I can convey the exact essence of this thing to all the members and all the audience here. Thank you from my side.
Thanks a lot, Ashutosh. Thanks for patiently running us through the entire, the deck of and the gamut of the bookkeeping and compliances world. So I have a couple of quick questions for you, Ashutosh. Before we wrap up the session, what are the top 3 red flags that you've seen start, do or have in their early stage, especially mistakes or red flags? What are the top 3 mistakes, common mistakes, or red flags that you've seen startups, many startups do as a pattern that you would like to highlight so that our startups here listening to this can ensure they don't repeat the same?
Yeah, the foremost thing a startup from their initial day does is the basic mistake they do is they do not have a proper bookkeeping process in in their organization. What they generally do is they maintain an Excel sheet and they are done with it. So they do not know how much they have invested into developing an IP. This is the basic thing they lacks with. Second thing, if they are hiring the employees, they generally, in order to save some few pennies, few rupees, they do not do the payroll compliance. They do not do the proper registrations for the employees. This is the second thing that they misses upon. And the third thing is the reporting compliance. Almost each and every startup pays the taxes. Almost each and every business owner pays the indirect as well as direct taxes, but they lack with the reporting compliances. They do not do, for example, they do not do the transfer pricing compliances if they are operating with some related party across the borders. They do not do the related party compliances. So these are the basic things that startup should have in place because this cost huge in a longer term.
Very true. And on the uh, you covered both the taxation part, taxation basics, as well as the bookkeeping basics. If there were one or two areas, Ashutosh, of course, what we always say is horses for courses, right? Engage the best advisor, engage the best CA, engage the best consultant for the best things, so that you can focus on your priorities. Having said that, what are one or two areas that you believe the founders should definitely involve themselves, at least in the initial years before the company becomes massive, so that they understand, the bread and butter of business, which is numbers, really.
Yeah, first of all, the journey begins from registering an entity. I think there are a lot of startups or there are a lot of initial stage business owners, they do not register the entity properly. Either they are running into the sole proprietorship, or if they have registered an entity, they are doing a lot of different kind of business in a same entity, or they are relying like their parents or maybe their friends to understand the numbers. This may not be the area of the expertise of their parents or their friends. So they should have somebody having the subject knowledge in place in their organization, maybe as a friend or as a mentor or as a consultant, that can help them to get a fair idea how the business should operate, what kind of entity they should register, what kind of requirements an entity should have in place. For example, if they are incorporating an entity having the object clause of working in the IT domain and now they are working into the trading domain, that is something that's a red flag for the entity registration and all. So these are the basic things the startup should have in place at the time of starting their journey.
Absolutely. And Ashutosh, any closing comments from you for all our early stage startups here?
I just wanted to wish luck with their business. I just wanted to emphasize again onto the requirement and the importance of having the financial processes in place. By the term financial process, I just do not mean the bookkeeping. By the term financial process, I mean the regular reporting, bookkeeping, compliances, well before planning of the revenues, well before planning of the expenses, budgeting, and all of the reporting thing that needs to be done with the government. They should not mess with the government, and they should have proper structure in place before they are starting, or if they have already started, then sort these things out, and then after expand their business and do well in their business.
Absolutely. I think "don't mess with the government" is a wonderful quote that I will recommend for sure. And it's extremely important for all founders to know the basic financial literacy here, right? In terms of being able to read your own numbers and make good of what it means is extremely important. And also
Yeah.
understanding what does it lead to in terms of potential compliances, right? Because one thing we've always repeated in my earlier organization was, all good news can take the stairs, while any bad news needs to take the elevator, right? And you will know that only if you're on top of your numbers, right?
Uh-huh.
Whether it's a good news or a bad news to your co-founders, good news or bad news to your team, good news or bad news to your shareholders, right? What is good and what is bad is determined only after you know the data and you
Yeah.
analyze the data, right? So stay on top of the numbers and then try understanding what it means in your business and what kind of actions are required. On that note, I would love to wish all of you, as you take your businesses forward. We've also shared a link to a feedback form. It'll be great to understand more about, what else would you want to hear, what else would you want to understand, how your experience today was. It'll help us curate more such Thursday sessions for you. And again, we look forward to catching up with you next Thursday. Thanks a lot, Ashutosh. Thanks
Thank you
to
for
the
having
entire
me.
team for putting this together.
Yeah, thank you. Bye. Bye.